Cardstack community. I'm Chris C., the founding director of the Cardstack project, coming to you from the land of the Web3. Today, I'm joined by Kazm's founder, Ben Turtel, who is going to talk to us about customers, and more specifically, customer relationship management and the practice of CRM, which is a practice in the Web2 space, maybe even before that, but now coming to this amazing land that we have and intersecting with many other acronyms, 3 letters, NFT, DAOs, and stuff like that. So there's a lot to cover, and I want to welcome Ben to the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
Absolutely. And it's just so delighted to talk to people who are working on something that is not just insular within the community, but actually bringing new dimensions in there. So what brought you to Web3? I know you're working on CRM, but what brought you to the whole intersection of crypto and decentralization and obviously tools for community building?
Yeah, I mean, so it started because my co-founder and I have been working in the community space for quite some time, actually before we moved into Web3. And we both have a background in data. We were both at Google before, and we both have a background in machine learning and data pipelining. And, you know, as Web3 was kind of taken off with NFT communities a bit over a year ago, you know, we were really struck by the potential for NFTs and for Web3 generally to change the way collectives interact online. Right. So right now with all the centralized Web2 projects that we have in Web2, right, your relationships are owned by those centralized companies. If you have a token that represents your membership in some community or your relationship with someone, then it's amazing to imagine all the startups and all the little very niche projects that could emerge to support those relationships. You can imagine a community really dynamically moving around the web and moving in and out of platforms and having all sorts of experiences that today is impossible because those relationships are stuck within one platform.
Absolutely. And if you have an app store relationship, a lot of times you don't even know the email address of the people who are using your app unless you have a second means. And it's also very hard to move your Reddit community to anything other than Reddit.
That's exactly right. The switching cost is really, really high.
Right.
And we've actually built community platforms in the past where we were trying to get communities to move onto our platform. And we came across that. It was so hard. They were so worried about having over 50% drop off, just getting people to sign in to some new platform. So we saw that there was obviously a ton of potential there. We also saw that, you know, all the projects we were talking to and all the communities that we were talking to were having a really hard time with data. They were having a hard time dealing with all this fragmented data. You know, community touch points are so broken apart in Web3. You have people promoting on Twitter, you have them interacting in Discord, you have them buying things on third-party platforms like OpenSea, and there's a record of that ownership on chain. And they were having a really hard time managing all this data. And if you don't use this data to know who your holders are, who your members are, how are you going to build an authentic community? So we figured this was an opportunity where we might be able to help.
That's really interesting, right? Because, you know, CRM from a community space and an angle is very different than CRM in the kind of you will enter this form into the database because you have talked to a customer once in a kind of Salesforce top-down customer relationship management by fiat or by hierarchy, right? So since you came from the community space, what do you see in the Web3 community that reminds you of the authentic community that you've seen in the past? But what do you think this whole new financial relationship and the whole, you know, occasional speculation and trying to just get in the community enough to get the check mark, to get the airdrop, do you think the financial aspects adds to or takes from the best community you've seen in your career?
So that's a really good question. And I kind of think that there's two sides to it. On the one hand, there's absolutely a certain level of buy-in you get when people have to put something up front to join a community, right? There's absolutely a certain amount of incentive alignment that happens when I pay $800 before being a part of something. And then I want to go wear that brand and I want to promote it and I want it to succeed. That's a much higher level of buy-in than you get if I just sign up and I join your Discord and I don't really have a reason to see it succeed.
Right. Yeah.
Right. That being said, I think right now it's probably over financialized as a space overall.
Right.
And I don't know that all this speculation is good for the core value proposition of Web3.
Right.
Right. So if you think about what are blockchains actually, right? They're big community owned databases. And you certainly have this ability to build up user data that the user owns. Right. And so now instead of that user data being owned by one platform who can use it to squeeze out more revenue from that user, you know, imagine if every platform I use gives me data about myself, that then there's a million other startups that can take that data and serve me better and give me great experiences that can be powered by that data. I think that's amazing, and we need to lean more into that as like the people
Yes.
building Web3. And right now, I think the impression for most of the world is that it's a lot of speculating over like expensive JPEGs, right, or these
Right.
tokens that don't have any inherent value. When there's so much inherent utility in giving the power of user data back to the people who that data is about.
Yeah, and I think people, when they talk about like, I want to export my data from Twitter and stuff like that, it's like, your data in a static dead tree format. I know it's not paper, but it's essentially exported files are useless, versus saying your ownership history and your Web3 wallet can be activated, connected by a dApp that understands them and do something with them. So are you seeing, projects really leveraging? So it's very easy to say the data is available and the user owns them, but the magic happens in the reuse of the data. Are you seeing projects using data that's already on chain to begin the, kind of like start closer to the finish line versus building a community from scratch with a bunch of like, the Twitter messages or something like that, or DMs like that? What are the opportunity today with the tool set today to bootstrap community on the data that's available on chain?
Well, I mean, look, we're absolutely early, but there's a ton of opportunity and we're already seeing the beginnings of this, right? So the most basic example is just that any community that has a token, whether it's an NFT or like an ERC20 token, right? If you're using token gated platforms to provide experiences to that community, then you're already seeing an example of this, right? Someone has created user data about themselves that lives on the blockchain. Now there's a million little platforms that can use that to give you access to an experience, right? That's the most basic one. I think then if you look at certain platforms like Farcaster, I think it's a great example where they're explicitly building this in a way where they expect a bunch of startups to build on top of them and to take this relationship graph that they're creating that's on chain and do things with it. And I think that's amazing. And that's going to open a ton of opportunity.
Right. So essentially, you see protocol design or, whatever platform protocol, very blurry boundaries, right? There was a very pure era where protocols are just Solidity contracts on Ethereum network or equivalent and other thing. And now you see Farcaster, which is like sufficiently decentralized, some web tech there, some decentralized tech, some pretty clever cryptography on the other side. Do you see these social graphs being intersecting, right? Because what's interesting about it is that the graph for ownership of NFT, the type of social publishing graph that can come from Farcaster, and then the type of relationship graph with DAO memberships are involving a lot of the same people. And there's no way for me to know behind the Discord idea that the same person I'm talking to is the same person. It's confusing as hell. Like it's like, oh, right, this is the person from Twitter. Oh, right, there's a person that have a different username on this network. Is this problem just a project problem, or is it something that actually helps the wallet holder, the person participating, understand who they're dealing with across these potentially composable network? But certainly now, nobody knows who is who, the same person. The syncing doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And that's a big part of why we're building what we're building. Right. So this Web3 user data is just really, really fragmented. And so if you're trying to run one of these communities, you might have a really hard time being able to tell the difference between like your VIP holders who are promoting you every day on Twitter and who might be able to buy a lot more of whatever you're selling and can really help you with growth and with engagement of your community, from like the spammers that everyone is bombarded with in this space, from like the rank and file members that you need to keep happy. Right. So, and then you have like every time a community manager quits, but that's like the bartender leaving, like all those relationships, that knowledge that they've held up that's just in their head right now, that kind of goes out the window with them. Right. It's also really hard to know where those users are coming from because this data is so fragmented across all these different touch points. So like your Web2 analytics tools might be able to tell you to the point of like a wallet connect event, right? If you're doing different campaigns or collabs to drive people to a landing page where they connect a wallet, they can help you optimize for that event. But they don't then tie into those on-chain events that tell you, okay, which of my members are actually doing stuff? Who are the valuable people here? And how do I tie that back to their presences on Web2 platforms or the campaigns that brought them in?
Right.
Right. So that's what we're doing. We're plugging into all these sources, we're tying that together, and we're making that really usable for you as a community.
That makes sense. Do you think that obviously CRM is in the type of, in a traditional sense, in the SaaS or, business SaaS product? And I've talked to a couple of companies who have a very successful business model providing essentially SaaS services for the people in Web3, Nansen being a good example of that. Like they provide analytic tool for traders or people who want to look for patterns and stuff like that, and they can charge a more traditional services. I noticed that in your application, you're using both Web2 logins and also Web3 login. Do you see the actual business engagement or the kind of like the product and the pricing thing when you end up charging for this to be more like a Web2 model, or do you see like a Web3 business model emerging from the business side of the tool set that you're offering to people using them and finding value?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, we are building this similarly to the way many business models were successful in Web 2. I don't know if that's the right comparison, though, right? Because in like Web 3, a lot of the business models are the way they are because we're just limited in the tools that we can use in terms of business models, right? Like, there's a reason most Web 2 software subscriptions are subscription based instead of like buying a token early on that gives you lifetime access to that product. Right. In Web3, it's a lot more complicated to even do basic things like subscriptions today. And there are totally protocols working on that, but it's early. So I think there's kind of two parts to the question. Like, yes, we're kind of like a SaaS subscription model, but also I think Web3 business models in general will evolve. And a lot of the successes we've seen in Web2 you'll be able to do those in Web3 as well.
I mean, what's interesting about the whole like lifetime subscription model is that, when Rome researchers came out in Cannes and say, we're going to have a believer tier. You pay me $500 now, you can get this tool forever. And I love you. And thank you for being there for me early. I was like, that is like a token, right? That's like a founding NFT with a token gate. And it's weird, right? Like I go back to Web 2, which is where I came from. We all came from the previous version of it in some way, shape and form as users or as builders. But, I do believe that there's certain business models that's just easier to do in Web3, and maybe those become more likely, right? Are there models that you see emerging in terms of what is the value that's being driven? Is there a way to take a cut of the values and driven in a way that's what Ad Network is doing, right? The tools are free, but if you connect, you can do that. Do you see that as a possibility space?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm hoping that at some point in the future, we move in that direction, right? One of the amazing things that's enabled by Web3 is that you can distribute ownership much more flexibly than you could in Web 2, right? It would have been a huge pain in Web 2 to like give all of your customers a little piece of equity or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
But Web3 with token distributions, you really can do that. And I think that's an amazing thing. It aligns incentives really well. It makes people feel good and get rewarded for participating in and contributing to networks. So yeah, I totally hope to see that evolve more, and I hope we get to participate in that.
I think a lot of the Web3 marketing, and again, I'm talking a little bit about the speculation and kind of signing up for an exchange account, work off the affiliate program. So the affiliate links in a very low tech, a very Web2 kind of sense has driven a lot of the user adoption, or at least provide the incentive for the part you see. Maybe the part you don't see is more community driven, but I'm sure a lot of the actual YouTube videos and the sign up links are more traditional affiliate things using decentralization, the thing. Do you think it's important to build out these kind of more affiliate infrastructure, commission infrastructure, and rev share infrastructure that exists and drives not maybe a lot, but enough of the commerce in Web 2? Do you see that being part of the CRM story in Web 3?
So I wouldn't say that we're super focused on like building out the infrastructure for that. I think there totally is an opportunity for someone to build out like the Web3 infrastructure for, if I could put a big catalog of products on chain and then just let someone else handle selling it and take a cut, and all that's managed on chain, they automatically get a cut when a purchase goes through my smart contract. Like, someone's going to build that, and that'll be amazing. And
that's a great thing about it's going to happen.
yeah, absolutely. We're kind of supporting those kind of collaborations, in that we make it really easy for, if you're launching a bunch of campaigns with different Discord collabs or different influencers on Twitter, we make it really easy to generate links for all those different campaigns. And then we can track when someone comes in from those things and tie it to that member and tie it to that wallet. So we can actually tell you which of your growth channels are bringing in not only the most people, the people that actually drive value back to your community, who ends up actually buying the NFTs, who actually ends up achieving this level in your game or staking these tokens, right? That's really important, is tying those growth channels to which ones are effective and which are bringing the members that you actually want more of.
Right. So essentially, if you cast a net, any kind of influx from that net, to the degree it's actually instrumented, you essentially have a much better model, kind of top-down view and maybe a detailed view of how that's done. What about finding new customers, right? Because one of the nice things about having the ownership of Bored Ape on chain is that if you could say as a new competitor or something like it, or a person building on top of the Bored Ape ecosystem, I want to address these people with these traits in the Bored Ape. Are you guys indexing beyond the kind of like influx to be able to essentially offer a solution around customer acquisition, right? Where using the on-chain rails to focus. Now, the problem is that there's no delivery channel unless the messaging system like XMTP becomes more of a thing. But what's your thoughts on customer acquisition by way of the on-chain data?
Yeah, totally. This is something that we do in a white label sense now for a couple clients. We do this analysis, but it's not kind of baked into the product yet. We actually have a machine learning model that has a model of every wallet and every smart contract on chain. And what we can do is we can say, okay, right now you have these 100 holders. Here are the 1,000 people that look the most similar to your holders in terms of their behavior on chain, in terms of the smart contracts or other wallets that they're interacting with. And we can help you target them directly.
Right. That's really cool. And I think this whole idea that people are experimenting with machine learning by way of these kind of like large language model like GPT-3 is that it's like magic. It's like, well, it's just a bit of a non-obvious query. It's a type of like, asking a question and getting an answer. It's just that human brain can construct SQL that can do that. Are you seeing these things being kind of effective when it's put in a pipeline? What is making, like, it could work really well, right? But it could also have something where it's like a bad ad target. It's like, it's a smart idea, but it didn't work. What is the current state of the state, and where do you think it's going?
Totally. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into whether these kind of methods are effective. And we've seen over the last couple of years, like airdrops were super popular and then they were not so popular. And now like there's a couple people doing them again. And I think like we're going to see those kind of roller coasters as the space evolves generally. It's always better if you can target towards the people who are actually a good fit for what you're trying to sell. Right. Yeah. It's always better if you can target the people who are a better fit for your community. And one thing that we've seen is really effective is if you first identify this group of people that you're trying to target. You don't necessarily need to drop them anything. You don't need to do anything on chain, but you can even just see like what communities are these people hanging out in? What else do they hold? Let's go find collabs with those people and with those influencers that they're probably following based on their holdings. Right. And that's a much more targeted way to go about it than just, whichever collaboration opportunities you notice or that happen to pop up.
So it's really a guiding tool towards that kind of business development and community development, less about this kind of like pay-per performance, kind of drop them competitor ads, retargeting type of thing. It's really just at this point still guiding the efforts of what is more, brand marketing in a way.
For that kind of machine learning work, that's right. Although I wouldn't say that's like the core necessarily of the product that we have out there today. Right.
So, we touched on this idea that being able to talk to a wallet holder seems like one missing piece in kind of like deepening that relationship. We see what each other do on Etherscan. Again, that is in no way the type of data that is useful and actionable to almost anybody, but it's obviously useful for developers, a couple of traders. What's your view on that Web3 messaging story? Is that really crucial that you can like send a note or send a message to reach out to someone by wallet address? Or do you think that's a little bit skeuomorphic mapping between the fact that messaging really dominated last phase of Web 2 and we expect them to translate here? What are your real thoughts on that?
I think that's a hard question. That's part of the reason why we're not focused on that in particular and like onboarding those users who aren't members of your community yet necessarily. Part of it is, yes, like in Web 2, if I have your email address, I can send you email, but now we're all getting spam emails, right? Like you don't really want to see the same thing happening in Web 3. The problem that we've at least started with is that these communities don't even have good data on their members, right? What we want to do is help the members, if they want to be a part of a community, right? If they want to be a part of that, then they should be able to share that data and that community should be able to use it to deliver a better and more authentic experience. Right? And that's what we're doing. We're empowering these Web3 communities with this unified data, with the end-to-end attribution, with integrated tooling to do stuff with that data.
Right.
And I think that's a big missing piece now. And the next step maybe is, okay, now how do we reach these other people that haven't said that they want to have this relationship with us yet?
It's a member, like, a lot of, membership organizations are like, hey, the one of the big value is that you have all these people you can contact. And then, obviously with Discord and stuff like that, you can technically already contact other members and people can be GMing each other every morning or night or whatever it might be. Do you think that the members need to know more of this data that's maybe available to the leaders of the organization? Is there like a members portal to make this stuff more available? Is there self-service information to make more reveal? Is that important in the deepening of the community?
So that really depends on the community. We have some communities that it's very important to them to have a community directory, at least for certain very involved members, where anyone can see, like, this is who I reach out to for this, right? Or these are the people in charge of this. And I think that can be really powerful for some communities. We kind of leave it up to the leadership of the community, depending on what they're trying to do. And depending on the kind of community that they have, it could make sense in some cases. In other cases, the community might feel way more comfortable sharing their data with just leadership, but they wouldn't want to share it with every member of the community. And I think that's fine too. So our goal is to put that in the hands of the leadership and then let them do what they will with that data and make it really flexible. So we have things like, for example, integrations and webhooks, where if you want that data to plug into other things to make that available to the members, you can totally do that. But we don't necessarily have an opinion on if that's the right thing to do.
I see. You guys integrated with Zapier with your webhook? Could people create a recipe or whatever they call Zabs to make that happen?
Yeah, that's right. We actually just launched the Zapier integration.
Oh, that's fantastic. I know a lot of people live and die by, like, if it's not on Zapier, it's dead to me. Because they've done so much, right? You know, most of the other endpoint that they need, they want to make sure the next thing adds to that. It's kind of, you know, one day there will be a Web3 Zapier, but until then, it's really a fantastic tool. You know, when you're looking at the Web3 tool space, and as in, you know, what are these tools that you know you're building? One of them is so that it working for a particular subsegment of it. Are we delivering as a industry the type of tools that you would expect if you're running a community, or is there some missing technology that you would like while you're not working on it yourself that you would magically happen? It would be great if this tool were to exist.
There is so much missing. And that's why this is like such an exciting space to be in right now, right? That's why we're here building what we're building. There's so much opportunity to build out more tools to make this take off. And we're so early. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a ton of opportunity. Yeah. There's a ton of tools that exist in Web 2 that should be built for Web 3. And then there's a ton of tools that are now newly possible in Web 3 that were never possible in Web 2.
Do you have an example of one of those? Like, you know, maybe describe like what is a tool in one of those categories?
Yeah, sure. I mean, token gating is a great example in the sense that you never before had this data that you could bring with you into all these different platforms, right? And that is super cool. I mean, I guess you kind of have Google SSO, but it's not in the same way. It's not quite as flexible.
It's different, yeah. It's different,
and open as it is in Web 3. You know, as I mentioned before, right now I'm super excited about all the opportunities to give me as a user power over my data, and then let people build on top of that. And I think there's going to be a lot of tools needed and a lot of opportunities for a convergence between AI and Web3 to make that data more useful, right? So as AI gets more and more powerful and can deliver custom solutions. So I don't know if you've played with any of these tools recently that they take like 8 pictures of you, then they generate like 1 million portraits of you in all these fantastic situations, right?
Right,
so
right.
Top of that, it needs those pictures of you, right? It needs some input user data to give you a custom solution that's relevant to you. And as AI gets more powerful, there's going to be more and more needs for you as a user to have data that you can feed the AI to get something
absolutely
back. And I think when the whole, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just on that one, I think there's a little bit of a difference of the way people understand AI. People always think that, you know, you need a lot of AI, you need a lot of data to train this large model to kind of generalize on different patterns and creating lane space and stuff like that. But you need enough data about you to actually make use of that thing. So it's almost like they call it prompt engineering, right? Like it's like the exact right word to describe the pictures you want, but it's also maybe the exact right picture to define what would be a translation to a mesh, and then the exact right prompt that may be built into the application to kind of make it easier for you to get a certain style of digital art out of your own face, right? So when people talk about prompt engineering, it's really about your data. People doing prompt all day long, they're using their own brain to like express themselves or express and imagine themselves. That is data too, small data, but it's really critical in making it relevant. And then people keep focusing on the GPUs and the big data. They forget that the source is you got to know how to take your data into that space to get something out of it.
Totally. And there's so many opportunities that we don't even think about for this. But like, I was shopping for furniture the other day, and like you can imagine a future where I have an NFT that has all the data about my house. right? Where it is, like where you could ship, where you need to ship something to, what suppliers are in the area, what all the dimensions are of every wall. And I should be able to immediately log into something like Wayfair and it shows me exactly what fits where, right? Based on the data of that home. And we're nowhere close to doing something like that, but that's the kind of thing that's only going to be possible if I can bring that data that like someone made that, right? Someone has a blueprint of my house somewhere when they constructed the house, but I as a user don't have easy access to that now. It's not interoperable. But when it is, you can imagine that just being a huge explosion of value.
Yeah, and then, I was playing around with this LiDAR detector on the phone. You can get a pretty accurate 3D match and some, obviously 360 video out of these things. And a company called Metaport does that for real estate agents. So it's becoming so easy to get good, like, data about you, the connection between the product, between, the best design from the best designers and the product that looks like it, that a supplier would love to sell to you. That seems like such an adjacent possible opportunity that I believe that it can come very quickly. It's really fascinating. Have you been playing with ChatGPT?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm blown away by ChatGPT. It's kind of scary, honestly. Like I've had it spin up Flutter apps and Python scripts.
Oh my God.
It does, it's pretty good. Like these things are functional. They're definitely like things you want to tweak after it generates this code, but it gets you started really quickly. And you could see someone who's not a super competent engineer being able to get started way faster and do really powerful things really quickly using this code. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I was blown away.
Yeah, I mean, the truth to be told is that one of our engineers said that there was a bug on some Solidity code he was writing, and he was going back and forth asking for a bug fix. And I think 7 or 8 prompts later, he fixed the bug because, there are similar problems that has been in that kind of space of discussing Solidity code, and he found that like little, space in that kind of hyperdimensional stuff, and it fixed the bugs. It's really amazing. And this is a really senior engineer, have done a lot of stuff, but not everything you do is like the most advanced stuff. Sometimes you're just trying to not make the mistake and get back to the average, which is really what AI gives you, right? It's like, this is pretty much what a practitioner of a certain level would do. And sometimes that's better than your Monday. So that can bring you back up to par. I'll take that.
Absolutely. I mean, and then there's just so much like very specific knowledge of certain tools or certain APIs.
Right. Yes.
Imagine, I could spend a bunch of time reading through documentation, figuring out how to spin up a basic version of something, but an AI might be able to spit it out right away, and then I just do the little bit of tweaking I need, and that's really powerful.
Yeah, and I think the humans are very much threatened by that. I just heard today that Stack Exchange or Stack Overflow has banned GPT-3 generated answers. I get that. I also find it somewhat hilarious. So we are there, right? With those kind of Turing tests. Is it real? Are we taking over? Thing is not really the thing. Is is it unhealthy to get AI output as the kind of official answer? Because on one hand, why wouldn't you? It's better than anything. On the other hand, this is something I read about on the translation industry, is that the word of translation has this bottom dropped off because no company want to pay for native speakers to do translation because they can always get some AI good enough version of it and maybe hire them to do some editing. But eventually, if they don't have jobs anymore, they don't do it. And then the AI doesn't have anything to train on that's any good. So there's a danger that it becomes cheap and it never gets good again, almost like microwave ovens, right? Like you will never get a good one ever again. That era has ended. The cheapness has defined the limit of how good something is. And that would be pretty sad for programming or even Stack Overflow.
Yeah, I mean, any disruption has like winners and losers, right? Any disruption means that some things aren't necessary anymore and there's new opportunities. But I think at the end of the day, it's a lot of new value and a lot of opportunity and in the skills that are open to new people who those other skills wouldn't have been available to before. And just as an engineer myself, I would love to spend more time focusing on like the creative side of things.
That's true.
On like the little piece of the code or how to structure something that like I know how to do that isn't super easy for an AI. And if the AI can help me like do a lot of the nonsense and get through a lot of the boilerplate much more easily.
That's exactly it.
Cut out my drafting of even first drafts of essays and stuff. Maybe that lets me spend more time on the kind of things that as a human I should be focused on.
Yeah, you still have to create the unique ideas and unique bits And they will repeat it. They like to repeat the prompts, but I realized that I was trying to like, okay, what if I just take my notes that I make in an essay or like an article I want to write, and it was able to fill in a lot of details. But they may be bullshit, but at least I have an article that I can edit, right? And then my best idea is still the best idea, which is, I guess, comforting. That it cannot create original thought in the same way, but it can definitely put the packaging around it so that you follow along. And I guess that's what computers do, right? Like, when people are doing design on Photoshop, are they that good painters if they were in the Renaissance period? No. But it serves the purpose, and you can now focus on portraying an idea. I think it's the same thing. I'm so excited about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at least with the stage we're currently at in AI, right? It's very limited by the training data that you give it.
Yeah.
So to the extent that we can spend time focused on stuff that there's not already training data for, like original things and creative things that haven't been done yet, maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that the incentive model that's created by Web3 would allow us to incentivize people to make new things, right? Like, maybe AI doesn't compensate them, and then there's really no way to know. And I know some artists was pretty pissed that people can make things in their style. And then they're getting no money for it. I get that. But, I think when you talk about Web3 and AI, my personal feeling is that maybe Web3 will provide a bit of the financial attribution that may be necessary. That certainly haven't intersect yet. And there's probably no explainability that we can actually make that connection. But if it's just a fund, if it's just like, hey, this is the training set going in, I'm charging this portion, pay me for the portion of the training set or some value that you get, that's certainly something you can model. With the tools we have in the financial side of Web3.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely a problem if people are providing training data that gets used to build some tool that then doesn't, compensate them for that contribution. Yeah. You could totally see solutions in Web3 being the solution to that problem, right? Where you have this big training data set and you have these network effects based on data, a bunch of participants adding that data and getting rewarded for the quality of the data and for the amount of their data that's used and how regularly and how often by the AI. Definitely some innovation. We need to do a good job of that.
And I think definitely something that AI can go and do the metering and the measurements and the distance between the two things. That's doable. People have done that, right? Like, how would you know if something is good other than measuring how close something is, right? So we have the ability to do proximity. So it's just a matter of tying that particular type of thing hopefully back to the financial system. That's a portion of that we're building there. So this is really a completely exciting field. And then, we call in the top of the show that the land of the Web3 is just like, it's too vast. It's almost like discovering a new continent. All of it is Web3. It's the extension of the web. It's not just a new space. It's a space that intersects with everything that's technology driven. Is there something that in the space of Web3 specifically, kind of moving, maybe away a little bit from the distraction of the ChatGPT being passing the Turing test, to something where, like, what are the technology in Web3 that you're seeing that excites you the most? You mentioned the social networks that's being built, like things. Are there particular type of innovation that you believe is, you play with that you're like, wow, just the same about wow moment that like that's gonna unlock some possibility? I'm always interested in what people are excited about.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's definitely a handful of existing communities that I'm super excited to be a part of in Web3, but I think that a lot of what I'm most excited about is definitely a bit more on the horizon. And I think if you ask me, like, what am I most excited about by this new space, it's the ability for network effects to accumulate to a protocol where there's not some big company that can change the rules down the road. Yeah, right? I think that's really key. We saw in Web2 the power of data-driven network effects. Right? Like YouTube, we have all these people contributing video and all these watchers that tell you which videos are a good fit for which people. And on Twitter, you have this big relationship graph, and you know exactly how to power every feed based on all the data of the participants and the content that people are adding. I think the possibility of creating network effects like that from user data, but then building in a way where anyone can build on top of it, where it's composable, you can have 1 million players doing more advanced things with that data. And you don't have one company that can then say, okay, we're actually going to cut off API access, and now only we can take advantage of this data in this way. I mean, I just think we have no idea what that's going to lead to, but it's going to be incredible.
I completely agree. I mean, this is very much aligned with our own efforts here. Like we have a data science team that's focused on using the the Python Pi data set, and we use it internally. But there was a day we kind of say, you know what, wouldn't we be able to just publish this intermediate data frames that we have on IPFS and let people use them, and then maybe they can build on it. Maybe we'll open source this code base and maybe hash our code of this little tiny work, like Jupyter Notebook style thing, and just put it out there and let people build on them. But that's possible because our data set's on chain, right? So if we just give some of our result sets on chain, maybe we can build a data graph. I'm not saying everything needs to be like machine learning, but and most data science is basically glorified SQL, if not just SQL. But when you get to a point you have that data structure, the machine learning really does magic from that leap. There's no other way to do it, right? It's like the final bridge, to cross something, you need machine learning, but getting there, it's pretty boring, but at least you're in the beginning of that thing, right? So we are absolutely thinking that this, that the injecting and intersecting the Pi data, the data sharing capability that comes with IPFS with the Pi data processing, it's really missing because, as much as people say, here's my Nansen, view, that's a particular slice by a particular company. Here's my Dune Analytics. You've got a query, congratulations, but it's not the type of data that drives these Web2 rankers and stuff like that you're talking about. But Python is increasingly that, and we are all in on that. So you and I are aligned on that thought.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's what you can do with the data in terms of data analysis and machine learning, right? But there's also just the power in the network itself that's not owned by anyone. So if you look at Uber or Lyft, right? They have these powerful networks of drivers and riders that it's really hard to now start a new ride-sharing company that's going to compete with those guys, right? But I think there's a company called Teleport.xyz. I hope I'm getting that right? That's building this in a decentralized way where there's a protocol for drivers and passengers, and you could have a million little apps built on top of it and compete with the front end that leverages this network, but it all goes to that network without one company being in control of that, which I think is as it should be. And that's better for the market and it's better for the participants who are actually the ones building up the power of that network. Right. And let other players compete over what's the nicest UX experience or niche versions of rider apps that let you focus on specific capabilities in the vehicles or whatever it is. Yeah, and I think that kind of thing is really powerful, even if you don't have machine learning or data analysis on top of it.
That's true. And we have seen that work even before we have decentralization era. You have Sabre, which is a booking system for airlines. It's really crazy that the 6-digit confirmation code that you get is actually a memory location for that record within the mainframe. I learned that. I was this is mind-blowing on YouTube, of course, or where else, right? But that was before the big tech era, then multiple airlines, and then later on, travel company like Expedia was building on top of that thing. I guess it's not owned by anybody and it's owned by someone. Visa, MasterCard is similar, but I think we've kind of swung very much to one company owning everything, competing with each other between Amazon, Google, and Apple. This is possible because it has happened before, even in the era of big companies and big enterprises. But for this to actually be a real community-owned protocol, wow, that's a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the very least, it means way lower prices, and I think it'll really lead to a huge amount of innovation because now you can have all sorts of startups compete on top of those things, which you just never had before.
I think so. And I think, with the same way we see trading fees on swap fees have competitive market, you will see the same thing because I'm really sick of paying $35 a fee for $80 ride to the airport. It's enough.
Yeah, I mean, 30% fees for in the App Store or whatever are just crazy.
Yeah.
And it totally, it changes the landscape of what's possible and what businesses can be successful and the value that gets delivered to the end user.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we have to think about Web3 as end users, customers, ambassador, but also as businesses that sustains and have the ability to provide a fair service, a good service at a fair price. And we've got some imbalance here, right? The services are deteriorating even in the advertising and marketing stuff. Is Google and Facebook offering market the same deal as before? Community Builder, the same deal. It's getting really expensive. So hopefully we can not just hey, here's new tech to do old or new things, but it's this is a better deal for everybody involved.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I really enjoyed this conversation because I think we hit on what's really important here, which is at the end of the day, the type of community that's being built in Web3 or the community that needs to be built for us to authentically connect to each other, at the end of the day, drives our meaning. right? Numbers go up and down, and sometimes people say, well, at least I made some friends along the way. Those are the people that will be on with you on the next ride. And hopefully it's not just about one cycle and two cycles, that you build some long lasting relationship, and whether it's from a brand perspective. And thank you for like doing the part to help people reveal their faces and real people behind all these addresses.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for the community, for your time and attention. Until next time, take care.